Welcome to Belief, Being, and Beyond with your host, Granddaughter Crow.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Granddaughter Crow here. Welcome to yet another episode of Belief, Being, and Beyond. And we are going beyond. Yes, today we are going up to the cosmos talking about astrology. And I have Catherine Gerdes here with me. Catherine, say hello to the people before I introduce you and all your famousness.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Granddaughter Crow.
Oh gosh, it's my pleasure. So there's so many things that Catherine does. You can check out her website, www.catherine with a C, hashtag Gerdes, Gerdes.com. She's an astrologer, a writer, an author of astrology and shadow work, which is what we're going to be talking about today. It's about self-discovery with the celestial compass. I love that you said the celestial compass. It's just so beautiful because I love seeing astrology as a compass. Her work has been featured in Well and Good, Bustle, and Elite Daily. In addition to astrology and shadow work, she also is the author of The Little Book of Crystal Healing. This and so much more, art, culture, etc., and so forth. So, oh man, two of my favorite topics is astrology and shadow. And I love that you wove those two in there. So let's just kick it off for very, very basic because in Belief, Being, and Beyond, we like to look at different types of belief systems and then look beyond, and so that we can open our minds to greatness, other greatness that we're not even knowledgeable about. And so I think you are my first guest that is astrology driven. All of my guests know a little astrology, like every little buddy knows a little astrology, but this is going to be great. And what I really want to ask you is, one of the first questions is most people know their sun sign, the sun sign that they were born under. A lot of people don't know their moon sign. They don't know where, their birth chart. They don't know what house it's in. So we're going to start really basic because in your book, they can learn all of these things about the natal chart and everything. So, first question, why astrology? What drew you to astrology?
Oh, that's a big question. I was drawn to it as a kid. I think like a lot of people, I really was like fascinated, even just with basic horoscopes, like in fashion magazines, something as simple as that, to celestial aesthetics, like sun and moon jewelry and those glow in the dark like stickers that you have on the ceiling that so many of us had. So I think that like a curiosity starts young, even if we don't really like um have much depth in our understanding yet. And then in adulthood, I got more curious, and like so many people who go and seek out a reading for themselves, I was in that same state of just wanting to dive down the rabbit hole a little bit deeper. And what I found is that astrology is really like a blueprint to our soul. I really believe that like as we get like off a path, as traumatic events happen in life, we have this ability to come back and return to ourselves through the information that's there and really like remind ourselves. Like I think it's actually that simple, like to remind ourselves like who we are through the work.
Absolutely love that. I like that this word of compass and this word of, blueprint, because, we still have free will and free choice, but these are the energies that are pulling us and moving us and doing all of these wonderful things. And so when someone picks up astrology and shadow work, what level of astrology do they need to come in with, or do you just kind of take their hand and run their chart and walk with them?
So I think there's information to be gained for somebody who does know astrology already. But one of my big hopes with this book, what I was really seeking, was for someone to be able to pick this up. And even though astrology is a lifelong learning practice, like we're really learning this for life, I wanted someone to pick this up and be able to read it from cover to cover and break down their own chart. I really go through the basics, the signs, really specific placements we dive into in like the third part of the book. And so I just wanted somebody to have like this basic lay of the land and understand the language that we're talking about, since astrology is a language, as you know.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
it. And so, what I like about it too is that even like I have been studying astrology for, well, I'll just say that I've been studying it for a long time, and you're right, there still is more to learn. But when we talk this language of astrology, we're talking absolutely signs, but we're also talking planets. We're also talking aspects. Can you,
Mhm.
that's, which is, yeah, which is one of the things that where people kind of get hung up. Like they understand planets, they understand, oh, I'm a Cancer, I'm ruled by the moon. Oh, I'm a Gemini, I'm ruled by Mercury, things like that. But they don't necessarily understand aspects. So, could you take us through the way I like to say it is aspects are the planets talking to each other. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, talk to us just a little bit about aspects.
Yes. So for starters, I think aspects are something that someone should come to kind of like later on. I teach them with like the basics in the book, but in terms of like stringing this all together and really like speaking a language, I think understanding the energy of the planets, the meanings of the houses, all of the signs, of course, and all of this. And knowing where everything is in your chart and then getting into the aspects, I think is important. And so, yeah, the aspects are exactly as you said. It's planets that are communicating with each other, whether that's a more of like a harmonious way, like with a sextile or a trine, for example, with a conjunction, a family of planets that never really separate from each other, or whether they're communicating in a harsher way with like a square or an opposition. And I think when we really get into that information, people can really unlock some things differently. Just as an example, if somebody had, a moon squaring their ascendant. This is a good example. The feelings might not be seen by the outside world. What other people see is one thing, but maybe this person feels for whatever reason that they have to like tuck away their feelings and hide them from people. So through understanding that, someone could put forth, instead of feeling doomed, they could put forth a conscious effort to bring the feelings to the forefront, to know that the feelings are worthy of being felt and expressed into the world.
I love that, which is immediately how, I mean, actually, you just did a beautiful segue into how does astrology help with shadow work? And it
Mm.
is like that type of a dynamic, understanding aspects of ourself in this roadmap with this compass and going, I thought everybody struggled with what I struggle with. Doesn't everybody feel like that? And in your book, you walk us through. So, I mean, it's so rich. People go and get it's already out. It was released by Llewellyn Worldwide. November of 2024. So go get your copy for self-discovery. But one thing that you do in part two is about the understanding of your signs. So you go through each of the 12 signs in depth, letting us know like what tarot card they align with, what part of the body, are they a cardinal sign? Are they a fixed sign? Are they a mutable sign? What element are they? All of this rich information. So honestly, people, if you pick this up and you look at it, it's a really good reference guide for everything. But then you go into here's the shadow work for an Aries. Ask yourself these questions. This is where you might feel the challenges. So, of course, I had to go over to mine and I'm just like, oh, that hit home. I'm a Cancer. So I'm like, yeah, I need to take care of myself. Yeah, all of these wonderful things, which brought insight to me. Even after I've been doing this for a very long time, I'm just like, these are awesome questions to kind of figure out where I can build and secure myself in my shadow work. So talk to me a little bit about, or a lot of bit, how did you decide astrology, shadow? How did they come together for you?
So I think like the act of like breaking down a chart and like reading astrology is in itself a form of shadow work, or it can be, right? Because as we're going down the rabbit hole, we're like breaking down our own chart. Or if somebody is, not looking at their chart and they're listening to an astrologer interpret their chart, some things you're already going to know, and those will be just like an affirmation, right? So not necessarily shadow work. But something might be said, especially if it's like something about a family dynamic, a tendency. Um, these things might come up to the surface as well. And so I think like just the interpretation of a chart is in itself an act of doing shadow work. I also really believe that like shadow work is also becoming reacquainted with the gifts that we have. And I think that over time, people can lose touch with that as well. And so looking at it again as like this blueprint to come back to, I think that is really important in the process to remember like your strengths, like those are in there too, you know? Um, and so for me, I think, I'm a Gemini. I have a lot of Gemini placements. And I think seeing like the duality in life or the multifacetedness instead of like, it's just this one thing is that's kind of how I operate already. So I think like looking at this as astrology and shadow work, like let's talk about gifts, but let's also talk about like maybe these more hidden things that like people aren't talking about with a certain sign or placement or something. I think that comes like kind of naturally to
Yeah.
me.
I think with any type of self-discovery, self-help modality, that you can find both your gifts as well as those aspects in you that you would like to bring light to, the shadow. What, here's a question. I too look at the shadow. I do a lot of shadow work in what I do. And how do you coalesce the idea between shadow and gifts? Are they opposition or is the gift in the shadow? Like
Hmm,
yeah, how do you see that?
that's a good question too. I don't see them as opposition, but I think a gift can be if a shadow is something that's just tucked away and hidden, then some bad habit, something we might ju like truly judge in ourselves, could of course be in the shadow, and then we like lift this up and we just become consciously aware. But the act of lifting something up and being consciously aware when it's a good thing, like a gift, that's performing shadow work too. So I don't see these as like contradictory, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So basically, shadow is just something that is not in the light, and
Yes.
it could be a gift, it could be a pain, it could be a trauma, it could be whatever. I
Exactly.
love, yeah, I love that you said that because, I think that the word shadow carries a certain, taboo feeling like,
Totally.
oh, that's my evil side, that's my devil side, or whatever, that's my dark side. And when, there's a lot of books about the shadow, which is a perfect time to do the shadow work right now, as a lot of books on the shadow is coming out. But this idea of, wait a second, shadow doesn't mean evil. It means unseen or hidden. What are your thoughts around clarifying that for people?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think it's purely something that's hidden. You know what I mean? I don't think this is something to be like strange about. And to make it less personal, it's kind of like if in the dynamic of a romantic relationship, an issue comes to the surface, that would be like the shadow, right? Like it doesn't mean like someone's like a terrible person because the issue comes up. Or it doesn't make somebody like horribly confrontational because they choose to reveal this like shadow in the relationship, right? So I think, yeah, like maybe less room for like shame and judgment and all of that.
I love that because honestly, I think shame and judgment are like the arch nemesis to doing self-discovery and self-knowledge. If we walk in there with the voice of shame and the voice of judgment, we're not gonna do the work. But
Mm.
if you can kind of alleviate those and kind of come at it from more of a generalized position of, oh, well, this is my roadmap, and here are the turns, and here are the shadows, and here are the undercurrent and everything, it does kind of alleviate this, oh, I'm this way because it's like, oh, well, I'm a Cancer. So yeah, I'm gonna feel moody and insecure about stuff. How do I handle that? And you kind of help us walk through that. I love that. I love
And
that.
I think like even zooming out further than just the signs, like looking just at the elements, like for anyone who's just aware that they're like a water sign, just sticking with that because you said it and I'll hop around a little bit. But like as a water sign, like are we too in the depths? Have I been like, just leaning into my feelings and making all these decisions based on feelings? And like maybe I need to lean a little bit more into air and really just like zoom out and think about this, or into earth and like be practical, or into fire and take action. And for air signs, it's like, are you too in your head? Are you overthinking it? Would it benefit you to communicate about it? So yeah, I think there's a way to look at all of this through just the lens of the elements too.
Yeah. Yeah. And so go ahead down the Earth sign. What would they be like? Oh, I'm too what? What would an Earth sign
Dude,
say?
so since Earth is the most dense of elements, it's, the least movable. And so maybe there's a question around stubbornness with Earth.
Sure.
Do we need to incorporate fire and move? Generally, that is like a good answer.
And then
Um,
fire, what would their little thing be?
yeah, fire, impulsivity. So instead of like the quickness to act, maybe step back, think it through a little bit with air. Um, Honor a feeling. If the feeling is like spurring, a fire stellium into action, then recognize like what's actually going on internally. Like take a deep breath and maybe sit with that, like a water sign or somebody with a lot of water placements might already be doing.
Yeah, I love it. So it's kind of like understanding the self so that you know how to approach, even when you're water being too emotional, or air being too in your head, or, earth being a little bit too fixed on the
Mm.
stubbornness, and fire being a little bit too like, let's just do it and not think,
Yeah.
that we can actually kind of pull those back in and go, I understand that these are things that I am made of. And so, with that knowledge, I can move forward with more mindfulness. Is that,
Sure.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
I I love that. So, your book is divided up into what, three parts?
Yes. Hmm.
So tell us, like part one, you really give us like that foundation.
Yes. So in the beginning, I just wanted to give some like basics of the chart. Signs are technically considered basics, but since I really knew I wanted that to be the meat of the book, that becomes part two. And so we do everything else in the beginning. We do planets and the luminaries. We do the aspects there just to kind of get that out of the way, although I recommend returning back to that at the end. We get into the elements as well, what I just covered. And we get into the houses and the meanings within those.
I love it. I love it. One way that I like to explain astrology, and I'd like to hear your take on this. Um, I kind of say that astrology is like a play, and each of the houses is a certain stage or scene in your life, whether it's yourself or
Mm.
your health or your relationships or your career. And then the planets are kind of like these dynamic superstars. Like they're going to bring the Jupiter big lucky effect, or they're going to bring the Mars 1-2 punch. And, and then the sign that those show up in are kind of like the costume. Like, what is my mood?
Mm.
And so you kind of follow what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
What do you think about that? That's kind of how I explain it to people.
I love that. And I think you said it in such a succinct way as well, that like the sign is really like informing it, right? Like it's a really important piece, but I like that you leave it to the end, actually. The houses are fascinating just from like an archetypal journey. And this idea of starting with the self, with the first house, which is associated with Aries, um, starting with this and being like, it's a very self-focused part of the chart. We start to open up to what we have in the second house. We start to open up to our community in our early childhood in the third. We move into our teenage years in the fourth with Cancer. And then we start to develop new relationships in the fifth and hobbies and creative expression in the fifth house. Health in the sixth, as you mentioned, and like a daily work routine. Then we get into some more serious relationships with the seventh with marriage, extending into the eighth with contracts, and like deeper intimacy. In ninth, higher learning, and 10th, career. So everything I've just outlined from first to the 10th, very vaguely, is really you and other people, right? Like there's still some relationships peppered throughout all of that. And in the 11th, we start to enter into an idea of service through specifically humanitarian action. We see community groups here. So there's still some people here, but now we move into a service element. But the 12th is like the real deal service. This is like, sometimes it's referred to as the moksha house, the awakening and awareness house. And so it's deeply spiritual and it really is not about the self. And so this is like this incredible progressive journey through each of the signs, right? And it's fascinating to look at it as just like all of the houses as your life. I don't know if that's like too big picture.
Oh, I think that
But
you said that so wonderfully. I have
okay.
never heard it like that, but I'm just like, oh, yeah, roadmap, blueprint. It makes and it has an effect such as the morning and then the noon and then the evening and then the night. It gives the same pattern. So yeah,
Yeah.
keep going because that was brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, I really like looking at the houses through that lens and really making that separation point too. I think there's something about this, that separation point between the 10th and the 11th. We can kind of do that in different areas, but with the 10th and 11th, there's something about I think at the end of the 10th house, we start to get into that like moment where someone's wondering like what is it all for, and then they really step into service in a different way.
I love that.
Um,
Yeah.
but with I mentioned the like childhood years and all of that stuff earlier with the third and the fourth and all that. And in the sign portion of the book, in the middle section, which I call the meat of the book, it was really important to me to put associations with each of the signs. First of all, because they just exist, and that's a part of the knowledge that we have, thankfully. But I also thought, maybe some like light bulb goes off for somebody, something that I couldn't know personally in their life. That if somebody, let's say, um, had a lot of placements in cancer and they read that the phrase for cancer is I feel. And then they start noticing, oh my gosh, I say the word I feel at the start of a sentence. I say this all the time in my life.
Right.
Or if somebody with a Gemini stellium learns that the part of the body associated with this sign is the hands and the arms, um, they start noticing they have like a special relationship somehow. Maybe it's through writing. Maybe they learned sign language when they were a kid. These are things I wouldn't possibly know about them, of course. But I think there's something pretty magical about learning these associations, color, like all of this, um, and starting to put those pieces together.
I love that. So, yeah, so the second part of the book, you really get into each of the signs and you go through like that. I like the body part and the element and the I feel. It's funny because
Yeah.
I listen to people even if I'm just listening to a radio show or whatever, and I listen to how they say it. And if I get somebody who's like, well, I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that, I'm like, are you a fire sign? Or if somebody comes on, I think this, I think that, I think this, I thought that, I'm like, are you an air sign? And then you get those little warm bodies like, oh, I have my feelings. And then I just felt like it was the right thing to do. I'm like, water baby.
Yes.
I listen to those types of things. What does the earth signs probably say? I created this, or what would like Capricorn and
I achieve.
I achieve?
I analyze if it's Virgo. Yeah, I achieve. Yeah, I have. There's such, and I said before about like stubbornness because we were talking about like, other energies to lean into, and that served that purpose. But that really, earth energy is so reliable for that reason too, right? So like we can look at that as a gift too.
Foundational,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
when I look at earth signs, sometimes they can be misunderstood because they're foundational. And especially like even Taurus energy, which is fixed earth, they could be seen as stubborn, but really they're just trying to keep this show going, people, they're
Yes.
just trying to keep the
Yes.
show going. I love that. And so then you'd also relay it to like a tarot card. You give us like these little points that we can journal prompts and such. I mean, there's so much in here that we can self-discover, and then maybe even like it'd be really cool for like a friend group or a book club to read this book together. They would really coalesce by understanding, oh, well, I thought you were being a big baby. Here you are, just a cancer, or whatever,
I think astrology like elicits a lot of empathy, right? And even
Yes.
like the most I mean, just as an example, like the most confident seeming person, like someone you think has like nothing, just like everything is just like smooth sailing. Like not only are there like likely harsh aspects and something we could like pluck out and see like, oh, that's a challenge, but everybody has a Chiron placement, right? Like some place that indicates deep sensitivity related to some past wounding, that informs their present path, even if that's not useful for it to inform their present path.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's always something in there.
I love astrology because I say that it's kind of like part science, part mysticism,
Mhm.
but in truth, mankind has been using looking up at the stars for I don't even know how long,
Yeah.
but it really kind of is like this you start the book as above, so below kind of feeling. I love that. And so then part three, further exploration. What do you have in part three? What can people experience there?
So I thought it was really important to go beyond the basics that I did with some of the planetary energies in that chapter. And I wanted to get into like Jupiter and blessings in the chart. I thought that was really important. I wanted to get into intuitive gifts and how we pick up some of that in the chart. I wanted to do Chiron and healing, and really dig into that. I thought was important. And probably one of my favorite topics in any one-on-one reading, but also like to cover in the book, of course, was the nodes and a purposeful life. So
I
getting into
love
more
that.
of that.
I love that with the nodes because that's where I kept getting hung up. I was like, wait, what is the node again? Which one's the north one? Which one's the south one? Why are they always in opposition? Like, what is this about? Like, I'm always like, tell me more about nodes, and then I'll learn about it, and then my mind dumps it out, and I'm like, ah. So yeah, I love that you go into the nodes. I do. Why do they? Why are they always in opposition? Is there an explanation for that, or is it just?
So they're always in retrograde and they're in relation to the moon. Um, And it's really interesting wherever they're transiting at a certain point to pay attention to with the South Node, what might be leaving, where we might need a little bit more surrender. And you can also look at this in a natal chart, of course, too. But with the North Node, what maybe we will be leaning into, what we might be magnetically drawn to. And in a natal chart, where we're likely to find some deep fulfillment as well. And so, especially if that, North Node is aspecting something, that's something to pay attention to, especially if it's a conjunction, because that's informing that path forward also.
So if you're
Um,
enjoying the Belief Being and Beyond podcast and would like to support it, I'm on Patreon. Just go to Patreon, Granddaughter Crow, or you can find it at granddaughtercrow.com. Thank you so
also,
much. I love
um,
that.
yeah.
So, if you are listening to this and you're like, this sounds really interesting, the words that they're using, but I have no idea, and they're starting to speak Greek, pick up this book. You can get it anywhere books are sold. It is published by Llewellyn. We have Catherine Gerdes here. You also do on your website, you offer astrology readings, right?
I do. Yes, I offer sessions for people to understand this. I usually break it up into natal chart for the first half and then transits and for people listening, transits just mean like where the energy is moving right now, where you might want to pay more attention, where you might want to tread more lightly, why things might be heavier at certain points in life, in certain chapters. So I love dividing the readings up into the natal chart and the transit reading for
I
people.
love that. I love that. So basically, the natal chart is like your blueprint, right?
Yes.
And then the transits are like what's going on right now and how it talks to your blueprint. Can you?
You got it. Yes.
Okay.
So whenever we move from the natal chart into the transits, with your natal chart, we're just looking at this one chart. But when we move over to the transits, I'm still looking at a person's chart and I'm looking at the transit chart alongside it. I have the ability to see both on the same screen. And so we're watching where the planetary energies are moving, the aspects that they're forming with a natal chart. What looks really heavy? Is there a lot of stuff in one sign right now? And then, of course, like where it's going to move to as well. Another thing to pay attention to, or like where big shifts are going to be taking place, like is Jupiter shifting signs, where we'll talk about that, is like where the eclipse is going to be that will be upcoming whenever it is. We'll talk about that. So
Love it. So basically, somebody could come and get one every year or on their birthday or whatever. And the first part will be much the same. Self-knowledge, remember you are a water sign and you need more air, so, or whatever. And then the second half is going to be completely different. Like, oh, this is a year of blah, blah, blah.
absolutely. And it is pretty typical for people to come back if it's like 6 months, if there's a lot going on, they're in a busier season of life, or like you said, every year on a birthday is a really smart time, I think.
Love that. I also love astrology because, I also do one-on-one sessions, and a lot of times I'll get people who only talk to me about their career. They're like, my love life is fine, my health is fine, my finances are fine, but what about my career? And they just keep looking at the career. So, I pull my cards, I do my thing, but it would be very complimentary to go to you and go, what's going on with my career? And you're like, well, astrologically, in your career house, in the 10th house, you have these things and it's transiting these things. And here's part of what and kind of bring to light a little bit more. So people,
Yes.
if, yeah,
Yeah, and it's interesting too because what you said, sometimes people do that for, in readings as well, where they say they're very honed in on one area of life, right? But with the chart, maybe unbeknownst to them, we need to talk about some other area of life. Maybe there's a lot of planetary energy in the house of home and family, or health or something else, right? So, yeah, I think it's fascinating. I honor and love to honor like what people come there for. But if I see something else, I'm going to say something, you know?
I love that. I do because
So,
I as mean, a reader, there's top three questions, and it's like relationships, health and well-being, and work and finance. But when you go into an astrology reading, you get that whole thing that Catherine just talked about with here is myself, how I see myself, how I appear in the world, my persona. Here is my stuff. Here is my early childhood stuff. Here's where I fall in creative endeavors. Here's where I fall into relationships. Here's my challenges within relationships. It goes through every single aspect of your life to include like the 11th and 12th house of, what you said before, like how can humanitarianism and spirituality, that which is beyond, which I love to talk about the beyond, unbelief being and beyond. So, Catherine, what else do you do or offer?
so astrology readings. Also, I like more recently got into astrocartography.
What is
Um,
this?
yes,
Saw
just to
that.
break
I'm
this
like, what?
down.
What is this?
So uh, we just as we have a birth chart, we also have like a map with different planetary energies moving through different areas. And so we might see something in the place that we were born, for example. We might see if where we live now is not where we were born, we might see different energies in that place. And we might see different energies sprinkled around the world where we've been curious to go or have traveled to. And I think discovering this is pretty fascinating, but also it clues us in on the types of energies that are there. And that gets in depth because multiple planets are generally impacting specific areas when they are impacting areas.
Yeah.
But that's, for those who are curious about why things work out so beautifully in one place, but why they might be really hard in another. And then, of course, like people get things validated back to them with astrocartography, similarly to how they do with the chart.
Love that. So basically, like, I get people who are like, oh, I was down in Sedona, this and this and this, and then I went to New York City and that and that and that. Is it kind of like doing, I'm very basic.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So if somebody had, they had like all these blockages in their career in one town, they move, but they're doing the exact same thing, offering the same thing. Like there's nothing really we can point to as like a a variable to say like this is why it took off in this other city. And once they move, it does in fact take off. Or why they struggle in relationships in one place and like find a lot of tension with other people, but then move somewhere else and things are really like harmonious and nice.
Wow. I
Yeah.
mean, layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. I absolutely love looking through these lenses. So again, www. Catherine with a C hyphen Gerdes, Gerdes.com. Check her out. And yeah, a lot of fun, brilliant stuff. Get the book, get a book club and work through this together because I'm talking like if you run a team building exercises, it's kind of like the mystical Myers-Briggs on crack, you know?
Yeah. And I'm sure, even though everybody's reading the same information, different people are going to bring different insights to the work as well. And it can be so illuminating to learn from other people and their charts. I think that's a great idea for a book club. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Is there any last thing that you want to say to the Belief Being and Beyond audience?
I mean, thank you for having me. This was such a fun conversation. And I just, my curious Gemini self just loves going down these rabbit holes with you. It's really, really fun.
I love it. Thank you so much. And so, anyway, people, thank you so much for tuning in once again. Please check out Astrology and Shadow Work by Catherine Gerdes and like, subscribe, share wherever you get this podcast. If you are listening to it, just scroll down. You can text the show. Yes, I said it. You can text the show. I will get it. I won't know who you are. It's anonymous, so you can put your name or not and give us comments. I love this conversation, Catherine, so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being on the show. And love you guys, and we'll see you on the flippity flip.